If you're thinking about buying a rental property in Medicine Hat right now, whether it's a single family, duplex, triplex, fourplex, there are a few things happening in this market right now that you absolutely need to understand before you pull the trigger in 2026. I'm super excited to be making this video today because I don't think there's a lot of good information when it comes to investing in rental properties in Medicine Hat. And if you look on YouTube for, if you're going to invest in real estate, for example, you're going to get a bunch of bigwigs that have way too much money, and their rules to the game, if I'm being honest, are not applicable to here in Medicine Hat. So I want this to be really hyper local information. And I want to be speaking to people like me who's interested in investing in real estate. Maybe you don't know exactly how to or what type of property would be best for you. And I want to give you some frameworks and some ideas so that you have a good foundation for when you do want to start looking. You're more targeting a specific property as opposed to like a shotgun blast. You don't really know what you're looking for. And ultimately, even if you do find a property, you don't really know if that's going to be exactly what you want or need. So I've broken this video down into a few chapters, and I hope it really gives you some context as to how to properly invest and some of the, I would say, speed bumps along the way that you can look out for and mitigate those concerns. So in Medicine Hat right now, the rental market is a little bit of a unique market. I would call it more like a niche market of investment that over the years has gotten increasingly more expensive. And the reason for that is because rents have been going up. If you think of it from a landlord's perspective, well, property tax has been increasing, debt, like the interest rates have been increasing, insurance has been going through the roof. So there's a lot of more costs on the landlord that they're incurring, and they really only have one lever to pull, and that's increase rents. Also, second to that, there hasn't been a lot of inventory in terms of rentals available for rent. Okay, so that means that tenants become a little bit desperate. They're willing to get the properties right away and secure a longer lease, maybe even at a higher amount, just because they need to get into that next rental. So that's kind of inflating rents, which means when investors go to sell rentals, that is going to justify a higher sale price. Okay, so that's what's been kind of happening historically in the investment market, especially in those like duplexes or fourplex markets. And unfortunately, I don't think that's going to change anytime soon. If anything, rents might level out or still increase a little bit. Now, if you're watching this video and you're thinking like, hey, I would like to store some cash in a property, get a tenant or two. I've heard that's really good. Maybe you make some extra money monthly and that'll be great. I want to give you a little bit of a framework to think about. And this is something that I created. I've never heard this before from other investors, but I call this like a spectrum of rentals, okay? And it's a simple, basically a timeline. Like you have a far left-hand side and you have a far right-hand side. And every rental property will fall somewhere in that spectrum, okay? If you look at, in your mind, on that far left-hand side of that spectrum, you'll find properties that are older, you'll find properties that are cheaper, you'll find properties that will cash flow, spit off profit every month that are quite high, okay? Now, from an investor standpoint, you think, oh, that's great, you want a lot of cash flow, okay? Now, on the far right-hand side, if we're shifting gears, you're going to find properties that are newer, more expensive, but don't cash flow as much. Now, I firmly believe that every property will fall somewhere on that spectrum, and every investor's skill set will fall somewhere on that spectrum as well. I personally fall more on the right-hand side of that spectrum because I'm completely useless in terms of being handy, and I don't want to deal with an older property or tenant turnover, which is very accustomed to that left-hand side of that spectrum. Now, if you're super handy, you can go and fix things and repair things, and you don't mind tenant turnover, you're really good with filling in vacancies really quick, maybe you fall further on that left-hand side of that spectrum and you get the benefit of that additional cash flow every single month. Whereas on the right side, you might be breaking even, making a couple $100. But I want this to be very clear. You cannot have your cake and eat it too in small real estate rental investments, meaning 4 doors or below, a fourplex, triplex, duplex, or a single family or condo type rental property. You can't have a property that's brand new and cash flowing a bunch. It just doesn't exist in Medicine Hat. I don't think it really will for the next very long time. So what I would encourage you to do, step number one, if you are thinking of investing in real estate, is think about like what type of property would you want to own? And then think of, hey, like, does my skill set and my lifestyle allow me to meet one of these properties at the same spot on that spectrum? I have a very good friend of mine that goes after properties on that far left-hand side of the spectrum. He loves the cash flow. He uses that for his lifestyle. And he also uses that cash flow to help maintain and upgrade those properties. But he's a very handy guy. He can go over, he can fix furnaces, he can, if you needed to repair the roof, like he's that guy. He can do everything. Whereas me and my wife, we're completely useless when it comes to that. So we look at properties more on the right-hand side of that spectrum. I know that we're never going to be cash flowing a ton of money, but it's more what I would call like kind of a safe bet, to where you're not going to have a bunch of tenant turnover. You're probably going to cater to a better quality tenant, maybe a young professional or a small family. And there's going to be, quote, less headaches. Now, depending on where you fall in that spectrum, I would highly advise you to go after a property that also lies in around that same area of that spectrum as well. I'm going to share my screen here, and if you're listening to this and not watching it, I'm going to do my best to explain kind of what I'm looking at here. This is the duplex that me and my wife just purchased, and this would be an example of a property that would fall further on that right-hand side of that spectrum. It's a newer built in 2002. The price is quite high for a duplex, and there's only 2 doors that are each generating $1,750 a month. Now, we could bump those rents up, but that's kind of at market, maybe a little bit below. But my whole investment strategy is less headaches, the better. So I really like this property. It's newer. Yes, you're paying a premium. You're not going to generate a ton of cash flow, but there's enough cash flow there that should cover off repairs and maintenance. And my whole strategy is to have good, solid properties that 20, 30 years down the road aren't still going to require a ton of major repairs. Now, if I change things up and show you a property on that more on the left-hand side of that spectrum, it would look something more like this fourplex here down on Allowance Ave, listed by my buddy Darren McKay. This one's currently for sale. But when I look at this, I think of, oh, okay, further to the left-hand side of the spectrum, definitely not for me. I'm not saying it's a bad property. It's just a different investment style. Built in 1940, so it's an older property, but you get 4 doors for basically the same price as that duplex that I just showed you. Okay, now I won't get into the nitty-gritty details, but I think just by looking at this, you kind of get my point of left-hand side of the spectrum, right-hand side of the spectrum. And that's, in my opinion, a massive, massive part in building your foundation for buying rentals. What type of property do you want to own? Does that align with your lifestyle and also your skill set? I have some folks that just want to buy single condos because they just put money in it. They know that they're going to have very little headache. They don't have to take care of the exterior, the stairs outside, the roof. That's all built into the condo corporation, condo fees, etc. They're not cash flowing a ton of money, but they really don't care. They just want to park cash into a good, solid investment, build equity over time, and you're going to get some appreciation. Transitioning a little bit, I want to talk about the differences between buying like a house that you're going to live in versus buying a rental property. From a 30,000 foot overview, it's very much the same process in terms of looking at a property, writing an offer, closing on that property. But the main differences come in with the financing portion of purchasing a rental versus when you went and bought your house that you live in, okay? Lenders will look at rental properties quite a bit differently. They look at it from more of a numbers perspective, and going through this process of just buying this duplex, they basically put a scope up your financial ass and ask you everything under the sun and want documentation on absolutely everything in your life. So the financing process is quite a bit more lengthy, and there's this, I would say, this misconception that to buy a rental property, you need just 20% down of sale price. And yes, that's a threshold, but there's a very good likelihood, especially in the lending world right now, that lenders are going to want more than that. A couple months ago, before this duplex happened, we were looking at a fourplex out in Redcliffe. It was more to that left-hand side of that spectrum, but the lender wanted 50% down. And there were some other conditions on there that I didn't like, unfortunately. But it is basically up to the lender to dictate how much money they want down in order to fund for that property. So there's no hard and fast rule like, oh, if you get 20% down, you can buy a rental, any rental out there. That's not the case. And second to that, if you buy a property that has more than 4 doors, so 5 doors or more, you cannot get a residential lending rate. You will get flipped to commercial rates, which is a lot more. Now, right now, you could get a home that you are going to live in. Interest rates are about high 3s, low 4s. If you're buying it as a rental, expect that that interest rate is going to be a little bit higher. Mine was about 0.5% more than what homes are going for if you're going to live in them. So those are definitely differences. Long story short, you're probably going to need more cash than you expect, and it's going to cost you more to lend on properties than you expect as well. So always try to budget a little bit high, and then you're not going to get caught off guard. Now, things to look out for when you are buying rentals, the due diligence period can be a little bit more, I would say, robust. You want to make sure you're looking at leases. You want to make sure you're looking at what has that previous landlord done in terms of maintenance, repairs, annual upkeeps, things like that. There's nothing crazy, and that's very case by case basis. All right. I also wanted to mention some rules of thumb that a lot of investors look for, and that I admittedly look for as well when you're kind of, I would say, going through rental properties. There's a really good rule of thumb called the 1% rule that I think is worth at least knowing. It's very difficult to find in Medicine Hat, but the 1% rule is basically how much rent, how much revenue does that property spit out monthly? Okay, so say you have a fourplex and the rents total $4,000. Okay, if that property is listed for $400,000, that property would meet the 1% rule, meaning it generates 1% of value via rent, via the revenue, monthly. Now that would be almost be an automatic buy. I know investors, not personally in Medicine Hat, but that look at other markets where if it hits the 1% rule, it's almost like they don't care what that property, where it is, what it looks like, they just want to buy it because that 1% rule is kind of like a golden star. Now, if you're looking on that right-hand side of that spectrum, you're probably not going to find those. That's more for the properties that are on the left-hand side, but that's a good rule of thumb. I always look at that and see how much rent monthly is this thing generating versus the asking price or eventually sale price, the value of the property. The second thing that I like doing, and I don't admittedly look at cap rates, you'll see that as kind of like a golden standard of looking at rental properties, but that, in my opinion, isn't really applicable to me because I want like a real life screenshot of what does this property do with the numbers when I own it, okay? So that would be baking in everything, like even the mortgage into those numbers. And I want to put in some repairs and maintenance as well. I want to put in some capital expenditures. So that would be like long term, like I'm going to have to do a roof or I'm going to have to do, some windows, things like that. And I want to make sure that that property is spitting off sufficient cash flow, positive cash flow on a monthly basis, even with all that stuff baked in, knowing that that might not be totally real life, but I want to make sure that that property is sustaining itself so that over time it's paying for itself, paying for the repairs and maintenance, paying for those big ticket items as well. And you can simply do this on a spreadsheet. It's very, very easy to do, or start to build a relationship with a realtor or an agent that can walk you through these things as well. So hopefully this video brought you up to speed, kind of what the stormy waters of the real estate investment world looks like in Medicine Hat. And things are coming and going pretty quick right now. And a lot of times the rents to the value doesn't totally make sense because there's so many investors that like Medicine Hat right now, and they know that over time those rents will be increasing. So it's always good to get set up or at least have some type of online search to where you're seeing all these properties come up so that you can at least look at them and just quickly go through the numbers and be like, yeah, I like this property. This would fall on this side of the spectrum. Let's take the next step that's going go look at it, or let's run the numbers a little bit more. So at first it's more like, hey, quick litmus test. Is this worthy of a showing? Go look at it. Have a realtor guide you through all that stuff. And also, I'll leave you with this. The best thing that you can do if you're thinking of getting into the rental game is to build a relationship with a realtor, with a mortgage broker. This is a slight plug, obviously, but what I love to do with investors is sit down with them, go for a coffee, have them at my office, and I'll just have a nice big whiteboard and we'll go through that spectrum of rentals and figure out, hey, where exactly do you fall? Where is likely these properties going to come up in town, and how can I go to work for you to find those properties? Because a lot of rentals are going to be transacting off market. They're going to be transacting through people that know of someone looking to offload a piece of their portfolio. No, they know someone that knows someone. That's how the rental game works, unfortunately. And it does take some work to find that right property. So if that is of interest to you, all my information is going to be in the description below. I hope this was some value. At least it cracks the egg on the Medicine real estate rental market, because it is very different. It's a niche market, just like there's different niches in resale markets as well. So hopefully that serves you well. Keep good, rise and grind. We'll see ya.